What are the country's top CEOs doing to build extraordinary teams and cultures who thrive even during a pandemic? You're about to take a deep dive into the minds of wildly successful C-suite leaders who are evolving the way that we work in the 21st century. Welcome to this special edition of How to Be Mesmerizing. Hey everybody, welcome to How to Be Mesmerizing. It's Tim Shurr, and today, we have another extraordinary guest with us. Nancy Pautsch is here. Nancy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. Excited to be here. This will be fun.
Oh, it is definitely going to be fun. So this is part of our Mesmerizing CEO Secrets, really understanding how to create an extraordinary work environment so that people can, so businesses can profit. We take care of our people. We enjoy what we do at work, and we can help save the planet as well. So the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profits. So yes, so let me read a little bit about you, Nancy, so that people know why you're on the show. So you are the president and chief evangelist of Envision IT. Your life purpose is to initiate a sustaining ripple of goodness in the world. I love that. For several years, it was a bit of a conflict because you were working in the competitive technology industry, and it's not always warm and fuzzy in that particular industry. And so you describe Envision IT as a soulful company who has received global recognition by the technology industry for innovation. You've been locally awarded for all your contributions to the economy and the community. And of course, you're most proud of being able to deliver on your mission of enriching the lives of your stakeholders. So I'm super excited to have you. Normally, I would jump right in with the question, but I want to read something that you wrote to me first. Okay, and then we're going to jump into a whole bunch of questions. So everybody that's watching or listening to this, get ready to take some notes, because Nancy she's brilliant. And there was so much here that was so good. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm literally want to read something that she wrote that kind of encompasses her mission, right? Envision's business is technology services focused on optimization of the user experience plus security. Increasingly, people rely on technology to help them to get their work done. And when the technology doesn't work the way that they want, then they're not fully productive. And then they don't have the best day. They can't allow their genius to come out. And if you don't have a great day at work, then usually bring that home with you, and you're not at your best in society. So Envision helps ensure that technology works and is an enabler to employee engagement and business success, which is awesome. When technology works, employees can effectively and meaningfully contribute at work, which allows them to also take that home with them and feel like they can make a difference in their marriage and with their family and with their children as well. So if Envisioners can help more people have a great day at work and be their best selves in society after work, then the business is helping to elevate humanity. And that's where the tagline for Envision IT comes from: make awesome work. I just thought that was a really beautiful way of phrasing what you do.
Oh, well, thanks, Tim. Yeah, it's the world we live.
Yeah.
We live and breathe it, and really care a lot about that. So,
well, that's powerful that you said that, because when you're building a culture, when you're people-centric, when you're wanting to create an environment where people can really thrive, it has to be something that you do every day. It can't be something that you're just kind of faking because that's what people want so that they can be happy. I mean, this is really, you have to really believe it and be authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let me ask you the first question so we get in here. Okay. So you've mentioned before that the IT industry in general is not a conscious industry because many tech companies treat people more like robots than they do humans. Steve Jobs, was kind of infamous for, driving so hard and not really taking care of his people because he had his vision and it had to come to fruition. So your mission is to be a sustaining ripple of goodness in your industry. So how were you able to make that mindset pivot?
Yeah. Well, and my experience in the technology industry, I want to be clear, has been, not always conscious, right? It's a pretty broad stroke to say the whole industry, certainly our swim lane and my experience. And there's other industries too that I'm sure have pockets of, more than pockets, big streams of, organizations that aren't conscious.
Yes.
But, to make that pivot, I grew up in the technology industry. I'm a veteran in the technology industry. I don't look like someone who grew up in the technology industry, because, I'm 4'10" and female, right? Which isn't, luckily, fortunately, not luckily, but fortunately, with a lot of work, that's changing, right? But I grew up in the technology industry, and, to your point, especially with our swim lane, we call it kind of sharp elbowed, rough and tumble. And I want to mention something too, is part of that, I think, and this could be a whole nother podcast, is, the technology industry is kind of a victim of its own success. I never like to talk too much about victim or claim victim, but if you think about the technology industry, there's a lot of expectations in it, especially with investors, right? They want quick returns and big returns, right? And so that kind of feeds, not really healthy environments oftentimes, right? Manufactured carrots and sticks to incent behavior and, just make the numbers, right? But again, part of that is just natural from all that success. So it kind of is the nature of the beast. Nevertheless, I grew up in that and spent a lot of time in just, unconscious cultures, right? Where, they were rough and tumble and it was all about the numbers no matter what. And so that's, shareholder only focused and short term, right? And what did you do for me in the last hour, much less, yesterday. So nevertheless, you had mentioned, how did I make that pivotal, that mindset? It wasn't just one thing. It was kind of a series, because I'm a slow learner, Tim. So the first one, I guess, kind of like a fish in water. I didn't realize I was swimming in it, right? I was in this toxic culture, didn't really notice it because frankly, I was part of it. I wasn't really on the conscious leadership journey then. I didn't know any better, but it was interesting. So back then I didn't know how to ask for help. And that was probably a sign of weakness, right? So I was just talking about a problem with someone, a decision I had to make. And that someone said, Nancy, just listen to your gut. You'll figure it out. And that set me off to an exploration of my gut, because back then I'm probably problem solving. I still problem solve today, but in a little bit different fashion. But that set me up to say, I got to figure out what this gut thing is, and then I'll just have my answer, easy peasy, right? Well, that set me off for the search to my gut, which really ultimately was a search for my intuition, and that triggered my personal growth journey. And that was probably about 12 years ago, Tim. And I, as a person, or personalities anyway, I'm a recovering perfectionist, people pleaser, and type A cubed. Not just type A, but type A cubed. Well, I'll outwork anybody. And so I applied that type A to that side hustle of that personal growth journey. Listen, I still work just as hard, and according to society, I had all success in the world, right? A great team, a title, income, right? All that stuff. But as I went further into this personal growth journey as a side hustle, doing it a lot, workshops, reading, everything, I realized, wow, I have all this stuff, and according to society, I'm supposed to be really happy, and I'm really not. And I'm looking around the people around me in this culture, and are they really thriving? And it really had me thinking quite a bit, right? And that's when I was saying to my husband, honey, I really think I got to go meditate on a mountain in Nepal or something. And let me tell you, that didn't land well, because we have, to provide. And so anyway, I was kind of at this weird state. I felt kind of inauthentic at work, right? All this stuff was going on. Great team, and my team and we together were quote unquote killing it, right? I use air quotes because the language even, right? But I felt conflicted. And then I came into work one day, and this was the bigger significant knock. I came into work, and my brother from another mother, I call him, my business partner, my best friend, Bill Crane, he came in and he looked incredibly different. In fact, starkly different. His face was disfigured. And moreover, and more importantly, I could tell he was in a lot of pain. And he had developed a textbook case of Bell's palsy, which is stress-induced, right? Now, just so you know, it ended also textbook. It cleared out of his system in too long of a time frame for anyone, right? But I think it was 30 or 60 days. And but that day, that was the stress we were under, right? We were leaders in the company, but not owners. And the company had recently sold. So we were still there trying to cushion our teams from the stress that was coming down. And finally, it took a physical toll on Bill. Bill is very stoic, the rock, very solid. I'm a little more animated. He headed up the whole technology side of the business. I did the business side. We partnered together. But anyway, that night, at the end of that day, that was kind of the dark night of my soul, Tim. That was me on the bathroom floor, screaming, yelling, praying for help and to get the hell out of that environment. Yeah. And then within the next few weeks, if whatever you believe, the universe, God, fate, serendipity, what have you, the book Firms of Endearment came into my sphere. And Firms of Endearment is a phenomenal book, authored by a few people, including Raj Sisodia. And it profiled companies that were conscious businesses, right? That were businesses for good, for-profit businesses, but businesses that had a stakeholder view, had a loyal following, and were doing good things, right? It was the opposite of what you heard so much in the media of business, the Wolf of Wall Street and the Big Short, it was the opposite, right? It's, hey, these are good businesses. Yeah. And like I said, I think that was in 2010, doesn't matter, but that was my inspiration. I'm like, holy cow, maybe I could combine this personal growth, this beauty that I'm finding in myself and in the world and in people and, all of this with career. There's hope, right? And that was my inspiration of combining, what you said, my life purpose of living an enriched life and inspiring others to do the same, really. And business, all these years of experience in the IT industry. So I immediately gave the book to Bill after I had, just read it at a pace that, well, it was my pace. And he did the same thing. He read it just like that. And he said, oh my gosh, Nancy. I said, Bill is the answer, right? And so we were so inspired, but then we thought, oh, now what do we do? Oh, so we started our own company. What do we do? And again, incomes, universe, God, whatever your belief system is, because within a few weeks after that, we met Bo Smith-Beck, the young, brilliant, kind founder of Envision IT, very young, brilliant. And funny enough, I met him doing a favor for one of my team. He came to the meeting doing a favor for one of his team, which sometimes that's when the best things come, right? And learned a little bit more about this beautiful small company, young company, Envision. And he learned a little bit more, Bo, about certainly Bill and me and our experience and our intentions. I gave him the book Firms of Endearment and said, this is what we want to build. This is what we want to do. He said, that's exactly, he read it as furiously as we did. And said, that's what I want Envision to be. So why don't you come join us and do it? And, we've been doing that since 2013. And, together we've built a healthy, conscious business position for the long term. So how did I change my mindset? I'll tell you, I mentioned I'm a slow learner, but that's the story.
Wow. That is a beautiful story. And I love how honest you are with it, because one of the reasons why I wanted to do this series is because I'm coaching some of the highest performing leaders in the country. And on the outside, like you said, they have all the trappings of success, but they're so stressed, so unhappy, so frustrated, always carrying the pressure and not feeling like, they're always making a difference. And so, being able to create an environment where you love going to work. If it's Sunday night, you're not already depressed because you have to go to work the next day, or you're not walking around going, I can't wait till Friday. Thank God it's Friday, because you actually enjoy what you're doing. And right. So I love what you said. And there's so many false beliefs in there that hold people back, like, asking questions is a sign of weakness, right. But people are riddled with those ideas. Yeah. So making a business where you can actually do meaningful work and feel good about what you do. That's awesome. So you said that one quick way that leaders can improve their culture is through providing meaningful work and defining a higher purpose. So what do you mean by meaningful work and a higher purpose at work?
Yeah, well, I think, those go hand in hand, right? They really do. First, I think it's really important for any company, but particularly with conscious businesses, that's one of our first thing is defining our higher purpose, right? Mm-hmm. Listen, we're a for-profit company. Profits are not bad, at least in our world.
You can do more good when you have money.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that helps fund innovation. Listen, a conscious culture and people really spark innovation, but you also have to fund that, right? And rainy days, look at the pandemic, right? So profits aren't bad. It's when they're used wrong, you know what I mean? Or the profit maximization fallacy from some non-conscious folks, right?
Yeah.
Or organizations, but they go hand in hand. So first, what's your higher purpose than just making money? Sure, making money, profitability is a stakeholder, one of many, right? That's certainly an important one. But why are you in business? What's your why, right? And then, meaningful work really stems from that. Hopefully, other people are inspired by your higher purpose and want to contribute to it and meaningfully contribute to it. And that's where, you get meaningful work, is working towards a higher purpose and finding people inspired that want to contribute to that intrinsically, right? And then beyond that, meaningful work, I think it's really important, and this is something we take a fair amount of time with, is, helping people understand, helping it be clear as to how their everyday work and efforts contribute to that higher purpose, like how their work matters, right, towards that. So they're real clear on that. But that's when we talk about conscious business and the movement that we're very active in, the conscious capitalism movement, there's kind of a framework there. And the first, one of the 4 tenets, and the first one is higher purpose. And that's your why. Why are you in business? What are you doing? Right. So, and that really, like I said, feeds to meaningful work. You mentioned those 2 things and they really go hand in hand.
Well, you got to start with the end in mind. And because then your why becomes your compass to help you know if you're always moving in the right direction, and then your mission and your values all become your compass. And that guides where you move next. So if you ever get lost in the woods, you have your compass to be able to find your way.
You're right back. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I really like that. So you've made the statement that leaders need to set the example for the kind of attitude and behavior they want to see in the workplace. Why is that important?
Yeah. And, when I talk about that, I really am talking a little bit about conscious leadership, right? That's the journey that I have the privilege of being on. And let me tell you, it's a journey. There's no checkbox. There's no finish line. It's ever evolving, right? All the work, right? Yeah. Continual. Yeah. And I think, it's so important, because if you want to lead a conscious business and a conscious culture, you darn well better be setting the example and being, what you want to see, right? You need to walk the talk, not just talk the talk. Talking the talk's inauthentic, right? And, as a conscious, authenticity is key. And authenticity is so important, for oneself, right? Being authentic with oneself and then others. And that speaks, why do you need to act like, live how you want to see the rest of the world, at least inspire anyway, right? We don't control anybody, right? But hopefully be an inspiration is, when you're leading a company, I'd say that a couple of those things are trust, right? When you're authentic, you build trust naturally, right? And credibility. Listen, if you're saying do as I say, not as I do, what kind of credibility do you, I don't know. And that's just in life in general, in my opinion, as a picket, as a parent, as a community citizen, whatever. That's just in life, in my humble opinion. Yeah. So I think that's really important. And, getting clear on your values and living from those as well, right? Your life values, some introspection. So, and there's a lot to that. When we talk conscious leadership, there's a lot to that as far as emotional intelligence, right? Which includes self-awareness and management of emotions, right? All of those things that I know you're so an expert in, and, but also, the growth mindset, servant leadership, it encompasses so many things, and more, many people, many conscious leaders that, again, I have the privilege of sharing and learning from and communing with, we're starting to talk a little bit more about spiritual intelligence, right? Kind of that, okay, what was that pivotal moment? What was it? Intuition, what is that? Because many people now, many conscious leaders, really, they're coming from an innate sense of purpose that they're identifying. So nevertheless, I went off your questions. Listen, lead by example, because it's the right thing to do. Come on. It's kind of common sense, but it's more important than ever.
Yeah.
right?
So you're creating that SQ, spiritual quotient, right?
That's exactly what it is, spiritual quote. Well, and there's
Yeah.
many books written on that. Cindy Wigglesworth wrote a great one, Spiritual Intelligence. There's more and more coming out in that. John Mackey just released his book with Carter Phipps, not just, I guess it's now several months, but Carter Phipps and Steve McIntosh. And there's a chapter in there. Their book is Unconscious Leadership, and there's a whole chapter on spiritual intelligence. So it's no longer shunned or shied away from. I mean, now it's on the table.
Yeah. These days, everything's on the table, right? Because it's hard to separate yourself, from work and home. What's going on at home, you're going to bring to work with you. And what's going on at work, you're going to bring home with you. And so instead of pretending that that's not the case, we're taking a look at it and saying, what can we do in these situations, right? How can we serve? And
you know what, Tim, that's one of the things here at Envision, that's one of the biggest things is we're trying to promote and support a whole life, a whole and an enriched whole life, not just the work life. And because then you're I experienced that earlier in my career, right? Which was, I felt so inauthentic at work. I felt like two different people. This was brain, and how about we be one and we be authentic and be integrated.
Yeah, I love that. Wear one hat instead of trying to wear all these different hats for different people. So, and it does hurt trust. Like you said, trust is the foundation. Say you're going to do something and then do it. It's the fastest way to build trust.
Well, and that's oftentimes what I refer to as integrity, accountability, right? Part of integrity is accountability. Say what you're going to do and then do it. Now, sometimes things come out of our control, right? But then we communicate mindfully, right? Hey, there's things out of our control, right? But boy, that's really important to me when you mentioned the one hat, because I had mentioned earlier kind of three things. Listen, I'm learning a lot, but a couple of things I've learned about myself over the years: perfectionism, people pleasing, and A-cubed. And that people pleasing, woof, that gets tiring, right? That's hustling for others' approval, and that's a lot of hats and a lot of juggling, and it's really tiring and really wearing and really inauthentic.
It doesn't land you in a place that feels good.
Absolutely not.
Why are we doing it? So as opposed to really chasing our own approval.
Right.
Instead of trying to get it from outside so that we can feel like we're worthy, we upgrade our own unconscious beliefs so that we know that we're worthy. We're already good. We have nothing to prove.
And that's something that really I spent a lot of time on, worthiness, right? That is the root of it. You've hit on it, right? That's so much the work, right? Is worthiness. We're enough. We're enough.
Yeah.
Right? We're worthy of belonging. We're worthy.
Yeah. The biggest fear that we all have is that somehow in some way I'm not enough. And because I'm not enough, I won't be loved. So I go right
unlovable.
To that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I go right to it now. I don't even mess around, because that is the core issue. And it doesn't matter who I've worked with over the years, that always ends up being the core issue. Things that we experience, big T and little t traumas that we experience when we're little, those form these beliefs, these unconscious programs that are running in our mind that are affecting us 20 and 30 years later.
Absolutely.
And we don't even realize they're there, which is why we call them blind spots, but they are subconscious programs that are running. So
and isn't it beautiful? And you can shine the light on that, right? And that's,
an amazing place right now. Yeah. Yeah. It's an amazing place in our human history right now, where we're shining a light on everything. It can be a little overwhelming, but we have ripped the door open. And the younger generations, especially Generation Z, they're coming in with a passion to rip that door open. They're not even pretending, and so it's we're in interesting times. And I think that they're really good. We just need to make sure that we are also developing that emotional intelligence so that we are also assuming the best in one another instead of assuming the worst.
Absolutely.
And that in addition to having a cancel culture, we also need to have a creation culture. Because I know that whatever you water the most, you're going to grow. And if all we're watering are the negative things that we're seeing in the world around us, we're going to end up having more of it, not less.
Preach, Tim.
Yeah, that's
absolutely. I'm telling you,
Nancy, here we go. Yeah,
I completely agree. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's that? The fable, the native. Which wolf do you feed, right? The angry which wolf will survive in the fight, right? The one
that's
you
right.
feed, right?
Yep.
I mean,
the wolves are fighting. Right? That's right. Which one wins? The one you feed.
Absolutely.
So very good. All right. So why do companies who promote self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and mental well-being have such high employee engagement and customer satisfaction survey scores?
Well, You know, so much of what you just mentioned, all those aspects really speak to, you know, well-being, right? So much of those things, if you think of, you know, mind, body, spirit, right? Self-awareness, emotional intelligence, all of those things speak to well-being. And then I think mindful and effective communication kind of come from those, right? And inherently empathy with oneself, empathy with others, right? And then the natural, but more probably awakened intrinsic motivation to care, right? And so I think when you say that, you know, my experience, you know, as a conscious business, and again, being in that movement, the conscious capitalism movement, conscious businesses as a whole perform better. You know, I mentioned the book Firms of Endearment. In there, they talk about conscious businesses outperform the S&P 500 14-1. Right? Especially over the long term. So, you know, I can tell you with our experience, because you mentioned two things. You mentioned customer sat and employee engagement. And so I can certainly speak to our experience with those. And what we've learned is, you know, at the heart of it, cared for people care for people. And, you know, when we got together with at Envision, Bo, Bill, and me, you know, our first thing was our unbridled passion to care, right? Bill and I came through environments that we weren't cared about. We were just, I mean, dismissed, really. Which, Bo intrinsically had this too, and so we said we want to care for people, for crying out loud, and that's what we started with. And then what we've learned since is, you know, is this beautiful interdependence among thriving employees and our other stakeholders. You know, you mentioned kind of that ripple. When we started really just caring for, you know, Envisioners, which we believe people are the source of every business, right? So let's start there. And then, like I said, we just noticed this natural unfolding and the interdependence among our stakeholders. Our stakeholders are certainly Envisioners, our clients, our business partners, people we pay for services, right? They're equally a stakeholder. Our business, as far as our profitability, and then our community. That's who we really look at as far as our first tier stakeholders. And what we learned is, you know, as Envisioners, you know, when you care for them, right? They care about our higher purpose, right? And care for our clients. You know, first and foremost, Envisioners are engaged, and they're not only just engaged, but they also have, for the most part, a really great sense of well-being. And when you combine employee engagement and well-being, that's thriving. Boy, does productivity and all, there's so many stats around this. Gallup has a ton of stats, but that when you just employee engagement already increases productivity, but when you have employee engagement and well-being and thriving, that takes not only that productivity, but the quality of work higher. So what we've learned and experienced, and again, this kind of naturally unfolded, was, you know, thriving employees, thriving Envisioners care so much about their work, right? They want to meaningfully contribute. And when they do, they're really caring for our clients, and our clients feel it. They feel it's a different experience, right? They can tell they're intrinsically cared for. And when that happens, so again, we already have employee engagement, right? So you care for folks. It's not that hard. I mean, it should be natural, right? You have employee engagement. That brings up productivity. And then thriving, you know, well-being on top of that brings up quality. And then when we have quality, our clients experience that quality, and that's customer sat. Our customer sat is 97.7% awesome. So clients can tell us if we did awesome, good, or bad. Well, first of all, almost all of them all the time respond to that question. And they almost always say awesome. And so, you know, I think, you know, what you see is kind of this virtual or virtuous cycle of they feed each other, right? So engaged employees have happy customers. And then it even goes further than that, because happy clients, delighted clients talk to other companies, right? And that fuels your business development. That helps grow your business, right? And then as far as a hiring pipeline, we're in the technology industry, but knock on wood, we have a healthy hiring pipeline. Why? Because clients and Envisioners they like what they do here. Clients see that we're the company we are. Envisioners know what they have, And they want to bring in other people that are really good at what they do so they can be contributing, help do the great work that we do. And they want to work alongside people that, inspire them and, help to innovate. And so you get great quality candidates. And it's like I said, they just kind of feed among each other. It's this beautiful cycle of interdependence. And so I think, that's some of the reasons you see conscious companies that oftentimes you see the win-win scenarios. It's not a zero-sum game. They're in for the longer term. They take a stakeholder rather than a shareholder perspective, right? And they see purpose and profit coexisting, right? So all of those attributes that you mentioned, I think, kind of are really key attributes of conscious companies, and certainly something that is ingrained in our DNA and operationalized as well. So, but I don't want to skip over the importance of a sound business strategy. It's not all daffodil rainbows and unicorns, Tim, right?
Yes.
I mean, you got to have a sound business strategy, differentiated, business strategy, a go-to-market, and everything that you can execute on, right? And then you got to execute on it. So, I mean, there's the big crux of the business as well. But then, for crying out loud, do that all consciously.
Yeah, do it all consciously. So I love what you said about cared for people, care for people, right? So if you're happy as a leader, you're going to care about the people in front of you. When you care about the people in front of you, they're going to care about, if you care about your leadership team, they're going to care about the people that they're leading, right? Your employees are going to care about their customers, and then distributors and partners and everything else. Yeah. And so, when I first started working with companies 10, 12 years ago, they would always say, well, what are your KPIs? The soft skills stuff and, all this, how are you going to measure that this is, worth it or profitable? Because it looks like an expense. And it was just, that's where people are at. They were unconscious leaders, not conscious, right? Or not as mindful as people are becoming today. And so you can only live up to your own level of self-awareness. And collectively, what we're doing is we're just increasing self-awareness for as many company leaders as possible, because I think that businesses will transform the world, not individuals. I think that the businesses have to do it.
Tim, when you had mentioned, one of the ways that with our core business, I mean, the services that we deliver, that we're working to elevate humanity, right? If you think about this, how many people in the world are employed by for-profit companies? So take out, government entities, take out nonprofits who do important work, right? Let's not take that. But look at how many people work in for-profit companies, SMB up to enterprise, up to globals, right? If all of those people worked, were employed in a conscious business or able to do meaningful work or, any of these things, talk about moving the needle on societal good, huh?
Yeah. Faster than any other method that I could think of.
It's really simple, isn't it? It's just simple.
Yeah. We just got to figure it out. Now we're just sharing it with the world. That's what we're doing. We're sharing it with as many people, and many different organizations are awakening at the same time. And we're just sharing, and then getting into the nitty gritty of, okay, now how do you do this? Right? How do you become more mindful? How do you care for people? And because a lot of times, especially when I started training people to do what I do, I realized that, I wanted to talk about all the big exciting stuff, the graduate school level. And I found that most people were still in kindergarten trying to figure it out. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And so we really do. And that's not a slight in any way. It's just recognizing that sometimes we want to run with it, and we think that people are farther along with their awareness than they are. And, in my background with psychology, that is not the case. Most people are still walking around with the same MS-DOS program they were born with. Absolutely. We've updated our smartphones constantly, but not our human software.
Absolutely.
We got a lot of human, malware in there that needs to be cleansed.
Well, and then, you talk about mindful communication and empathy, right? And caring empathy, right? So that's really important, because you have to meet people where they are.
Yeah. People don't really understand what empathy is. Or they confuse empathy with sympathy, and people don't really know what active listening is. Right. People are making assumptions all the time. They don't know they're making these assumptions. People are riddled with blind spots. So when I first went into work with companies, I was scared because I didn't know anything about business or corporate America. I grew up around cornfields. My dad was an electrician. I knew psychology, and I really got good at understanding people. And by the time I started working with companies, I was very good at understanding human behavior. And then when I got into my first company, I looked around, I'm like, hey, this is just a building full of humans. Well, I got this. I'll just help them figure out what their blind spots are and start upgrading their beliefs and their biases, and then it'll change their behavior. And it did, right? Faster than just teaching, active listening drills and giving them personality assessments, because more knowledge does not change behavior.
Right.
It sometimes just justifies why you're behaving the way that you do. And so sometimes more knowledge can make situations worse. Right.
Yeah. And there's also that free will, right? People need to want to, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Want to evolve.
Leaders have all, that's a brilliant insight, Nancy. Leaders are always asking me, how do you get people to want to? Well, you got to understand what their why is. And you've done an amazing job of that. Last time we talked, you had 100% employee engagement. I mean, you don't get better. That's perfect. That's as good as it gets, 100% employee engagement, right? And so you do that by asking questions and getting to know people. So, all right, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So I'm going to get back to our questions, because I put a lot of time. We have so much to share that these questions will help us hit all of it in this short time. So anyway, Envision IT currently has an impressive 100% employee engagement, and also that 97.7 customer satisfaction rating, which is incredibly impressive. So congratulations to you on that. That's to you and Bill and Bo. That's a big deal. Right?
Well, and all Envisioners, I want to be abundantly clear, all Envisioners, we have the privilege of serving, Envisioners, and they inspire us every day. So thank you.
Yeah. That was in action. That's what it is right there. An Envisioner in action, empowering other people, and not just taking the credit, but sharing the credit. You can tell an unconscious leader because they'll take the credit, and then when something goes wrong, they point their fingers at everybody else. Envisioners and people who are conscious and mindful are people who are always looking for the opportunity to lift others up. So well played, my friend. All right. So what are some strategies you might be using right now to keep that engagement going, to keep this vibe going?
Yeah, well, it kind of seems natural to us, but we continue an active dialogue, right? Which is a two-way.
Yes.
Right. It's active. It's not dormant. It's not once in a while. It's just continual, right?
All the time. Yeah.
And you mentioned active listening, right? Empathetic listening. When the pandemic, at the outset of the pandemic, one of the first things we all did instinctively was call each other and, asked everyone, what does support look like for you now? Right. And then continued to do that. Right. Because it changed. Right. Yeah. It changed. And I'll tell you one other thing that was pretty awesome. Not only did we continue to always keep an active dialogue, right? And within that, when we talk about our culture, we foster a conscious culture. And we might get into that later, but one of the things about our culture, when we say conscious culture, it's caring, it's, a culture of belonging and psychologically safe, trusting, and frankly, with that, more fearless. And we can talk more about that if you want later. But with that, what's really interesting is Envisioners were asking Envisioners. It wasn't just, it wasn't a top down, or down up, it was across and over, and everybody was asking each other, hey, how can I support you? Wow, I can hear your child screaming in the background. Can I help? Right? Let me take this on. And that was just, it just was such a beautiful hug among each other that was palpable. Right. And it was funny because then in addition to that, we do surveys as well, right? Like anonymous surveys, because some people maybe at a certain moment weren't comfortable saying something, but maybe on an anonymous survey, right? And one of the questions on one of the surveys, because we did, a few, was, what's the one thing missing from your home office? From the Envision office, what's the one thing maybe missing from your home office? Just thinking if we could help take care, what, and you know what? It was a write-in answer, obviously. And more than half of Envisioners, I thought it all wrote in the same word, and it was Envisioners, each other.
Oh, that's nice.
I know, but it's true, right? I'm like, wow, holy shiitake mushrooms. That's awesome, right? And so, but others, strategies, just everything we do, I'll tell you, is in the vein of helping to support and promote long-term sustainable joy, right? Rather than circumstantial happiness, right? Oh, here's something that makes me happy for a minute, but really, what is a life joy that really fuels I mentioned a whole and enriched life. Yeah. So I guess if that helps, mindful communication, we talked about that, a couple questions deep, right? Well, what does that mean to you? Kind of going, not that everybody gets a 12 question, proctology exam, for crying out loud, right? But right. But let's, and then sensing when people, hey, need a minute, right? Just.
Well, it's brilliant what you're saying. Yeah, it's brilliant because the goal is to keep the culture going. You've got to keep the questions going. You've got to keep the conversations going. You got to keep asking in a variety of different ways. Now where people are feeling interrogated, but where people are feeling cared about. Right. And the fastest way to find out what's going on is to ask a question.
Just ask. Yeah.
And so a lot of leaders are afraid to do that because they're like, oh, you're going to open people up to complaining. Right. And they really don't want to know. And I think that that's just a missed opportunity.
Yeah. I completely agree. What? You got to be fearless. You got to be courageous. Right.
That's right. Or it's going to get you. You can be courageous and go in there, or you're going to be reactive because it's going to come out, the old sweep things under the carpet model.
I heard a great analogy. Who was it? Was it Brene Brown? I can't remember. Might have, but it's like the analogy was like, it's like termites, right? Kind of the shit. And then all of a sudden, when you do find it, you're like, oh my gosh, we got a real problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're asking and you're courageous and you're finding out, I apologize.
Okay.
That's a heck of a lot healthier and sustainable, and let's get to it. Right.
It's smart. Yeah. Well, find out what the problems are and solve them instead of them, popping up and costing you millions of dollars because of poor communication or people leaving their bosses, because people don't leave their jobs, they leave their bosses, right? And having to hire new people. And it will save you a ton of money just by finding out what those problems are and then solve them.
Well, and finding out what's going well. Right. But I also want to caution a little bit, find out and solve them. Well, what if you can't? Right. And then that's having, an adult conversation about what the problem is, what truly the problem is. Right. 'Cause sometimes it's not at the surface. Right.
Yes.
And then if it can't be solved, let's talk about why. Right. And then what obstacles can be removed towards improving the situation. Right. Because some things might be out of your control. So it's great to say to solve it, but it's not always solvable. And that's when we have to have those adult conversations instead of sorry, can't do it. Well, hang on. Let's figure out what we can, and so it's a double, triple click into that.
Yeah. Very good. I'm glad you said that. I remember a company one time that they, to upgrade their sales software that they were using would have cost them millions of dollars, and they didn't have it in the budget. And people were constantly complaining about that software. And so at first, the leadership response was just to say, we're not doing it, deal with it. We've told you, quit complaining about it.
How'd that land?
Yeah, not well. Right. And so then it became a battle between leadership and, the sales department. And so we went in there and we started asking more meaningful questions. The power of the quality of your questions will determine the quality of the life you have. Right. You ask good questions, you'll find good answers. And so it was all about figuring out what we can do, what is possible, how can we be an active part of finding the solution. What are some workarounds? What are some creative or some new innovative ways that we can deal with what we do have? And we started making progress on that. So you're right. Sometimes you run into situations that don't have an easy fix, but if you bring respect and you bring collaboration and you bring open, honest, two-way communication, it makes things way better than the alternative.
And to riff off that, if you don't mind, Tim,
please go.
What that also does, it sparks innovation.
Yeah,
right. And that's something I have to say, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, he said something, I completely agree with him. He said, in order to innovate for the future, this goes back to where I thought about empathy. You have to have empathy for the future needs of your clients, right? What's being empathetic for them now and in the future, right? To anticipate what their needs will be. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting. But just to your point, all of that, the questions, the collaboration, and in a culture that is a culture of belonging and trusting, people will bring ideas and feel safe, in that psychologically safe to bring those wackadoodle ideas that actually might be the next, something to build upon, right?
Sure.
And so that's just it. All of that is what really drives innovation. And so,
I mean, Gmail was a side hustle. It was a side project, right? With a programmer at Google had a side project, and it became Gmail. We use it all the time. And I like what you said about anticipation. The great hockey player Wayne Gretzky used to say that I skate to where I think the puck's going to go, and that's why he was the best hockey player of all time. He anticipated where he thought the puck was going to go, not where it was, and so it's very good. All right. So the most successful companies who are people-centric and culture-oriented tend to use a very similar model. They focus on creating psychological safety so that people feel safe enough to have honest, meaningful conversations. They clearly define their mission and their values, and they interweave them into every decision the company makes. They also provide volunteering opportunities, book clubs, training programs, coaching programs. In addition to all of these, you also stand out by providing health and mental well-being coaching and education. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Okay. I will. Can I go back to a couple of the things you mentioned about some other conscious companies and all those things we're doing? And I want to mention just two quick things in that. You'd mentioned a bunch of aspects of, I'm going to say conscious companies, right?
Yes.
And I mentioned earlier the conscious capitalism movement, which, is a movement dedicated to elevating humanity through business, right? And really it's business leaders like us that are dedicated to using, their businesses for good, right? For good in the world. And we've kind of there's a framework that that is identified within that movement in of a conscious business, and it's having a higher purpose, a stakeholder orientation, conscious leadership, and a conscious culture. So that kind of gives kind of a framework to all of those things. But then going back to all those things that you mentioned, which were, those are all the things we're doing. We also have an Envisioner Endearment Board of Directors, by the way. So it doesn't just fall on what we call endearment, not HR, but endearment. Within, I'm just going to mention too, within the conscious capitalism movement, there's so many workshops and resources and everything, and all envisioners, have access to that. And by the way, it's all optional. None of this is forced, right? There's no forced fun, no forced inspiration, no forced, anything. It's all just at will. But you had mentioned health and well-being, or healthcare. So all of those things. And then, just, when you think about it, mind, body, spirit, if we're going to do this, first, we got to have our body healthy, right? I mean, the basics, right? The pyramid, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Let's first take care of ourselves. And with our healthcare, you can't even, it's a really platinum plan. You can't even buy them anymore. I mean, but it's all inclusive, of course, of therapy and other modalities now, as far as acupuncture, chiropractic, all sorts of different things. So, body, mind, and spirit for who wants to, right? All of those things. We do meditate, there's options for meditation, yogas, all of those things. Again, optional. Book club is so interesting. We just finished in book club, which is optional. We just finished the great book, Think Again by Adam Grant. And it was so funny because an envisioner actually said, I think this book actually changed my life. And that was really fun to actually hear, because, hearing about doing all these things. But we're actually just putting a bunch of folks that have chosen to go through a courageous leadership program with the great Rosie Ward delivering some of Brene Brown's work, all of these things. But health and well-being is first, and let's first take care of ourselves. I should mention too, as a technology services company, we also look at digital wellness, right? Remember, get up and get away from technology, go walk, right? And for when you can't, we also have micro apps that will help folks, as they're working, to take, mental breaks, either inspirational breaks with a little meditation or a podcast or a TED Talk. That's where they need, right? Whatever. And we also have a micro app for kudos, right? Hey, gratitude is one of the best things. We need to recognize big wins and small wins alike. And what we've learned is recognizing those small wins among ourselves and each other and all of that to specific teams, so it's not watered down, right? You can't do that, right? I mean, authentically, genuinely, excitingly, enthusiastic, right? All of that.
Yep.
What we find is even when those small wins, gosh, they're motivating, right? It's like, wow, it's rejuvenating, right? I'm going to keep going. So yeah. So, but yeah, health and well-being, a number, first you have to have that to be able to do the other stuff that we talk about. Again,
it's the foundation again. So, I have several clients that we have Tim days, where I just come in for a day and we do, 20-minute sessions, and they always fill up. So I might see 10 or 15 people in a day. And I'm able to go in there and shift their beliefs and help them. And they come in for all kinds of stuff. And it doesn't even matter what it is. And I start shifting those beliefs and they walk out and they're like, that was amazing. And so there's so many different ways that you can provide benefit. I love the other couple examples that you have, providing pet insurance, which I thought was great for some people don't have kids, but they got their fur babies. And so you take care of their animals, which, are their family members.
Absolutely. Wellness and reactive, proactive wellness, keep them just like ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And reactive when things don't go right. But yeah, thank you for mentioning that because they are family. So it's subsidized pet insurance. Absolutely. We can pay for it. Yep.
Yeah, that's incredible. Coming up with a program for funding employees' kids' college programs. I thought was very innovative and outside the box thinking. And you said that you just surveyed them and it's from asking questions that you found out that this is what's important to somebody or to a lot of our people. And so you put those programs together. It's just really good. So
that's just it. None of this is for show, right? I mean, every benefit that we have is based on Envisioners' feedback, right? It's what matters to them, not just what might look good. That's conscious washing. And I can't stand, that you mentioned, how do you know? How do you keep score? Well, right? You can know when someone's for real, that. So, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
It's very good. So top company cultures have lots of taglines, catchphrases, transformational language. They'll change the names of their meeting rooms, to make it more empowering. And you've mentioned many examples of this. So, your HR director is more of your Imagineer. I've had HR directors that changed it to, director of employee experience, you're the chief evangelist,
I'm the chief evangelist of stakeholder value. So that's a little bit longer. Yeah. Chief evangelist of stakeholder value. I mean, why not? Why keep it simple, right? No, I'm just kidding. It's a little bit longer.
But it's clear though. You're being very clear in what it means. Instead of head counts, you have heart counts. You just change the language. I call it transformational vocabulary. You change the language and it changes the buttons that are pushed in your brain that produces new, emotional feelings. And so there's psychological research that backs up the importance of using that kind of language. So
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, why do you think that makes such an impact?
Well, part of it is how we do it, I think. Right. I mean, the titles aren't handed down. Let's be clear that the person who the title is for will do kind of small group sessions to come up with them. So, sure. And it's the person who has the title. It might be that person's direct leader and then someone else, in the company. And it's really led by the person who the title is going to be. Right. And we talk about what they're doing. Right? What's their role? And then who are they? What's important? For example, our head of marketing is cultivator of connection, right? We have another title, and this is a fun one. I'll tell you this real quick. I'll talk fast because I bet we're getting low on time or short on time, but we have one who's in operations and her title is experience optimator. Okay. And so her role, what she does, the intention of her role is to make it easier to do business with us and easier for us to do business. So business partners, clients, internally, right? And so it's really to optimize that experience of business transacting, right? But here's the thing. So it's optimized, right? But experience optimator, there is no such word as optimator. However, there's a spot in beer called optimator. And this envisioner, she's in a beer connoisseur. And so experience optimator is perfect for her because it's an inside joke and or it's an inside meaning, but it's a play on words, but it matters to her and it also explains what she does. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. There's three main principles that we tend to, we both believe in, right? And we've covered them today. Three, what I call mesmerizing leadership principles: continually strive to be your best self, make work more meaningful, and care about others. So, and I also think that, continually upgrading your beliefs and your self-awareness. And that happens through being able to have psychological safety so people can challenge you, they can give you feedback, right? You're asking questions, you're keeping the conversations going. That's what it means to be conscious and to be mindful. So one more quick question, because I know a lot of our listeners are wanting to know the answer to this. Pre-COVID, there was a belief that you couldn't have remote workforce because you got to keep an eye on them, because otherwise they're not going to work, and there was that level of mistrust, and employees felt that too. But now we're, on the other side of COVID, hopefully, or somewhere in there. And they have found that a remote workforce has actually increased engagement. Unfortunately, anxiety is also increased and burnout, but engagement and productivity actually went up because people are working from home. So what do you think the new belief is now?
Well, quick question, you say. I'll try to answer that quickly. I think the pandemic, listen, it caused needless suffering to many, right? It wasn't, I don't want to put lipstick on it, right? I mean, it was terrible, but there were some bright lights that came out of it, right? You have to look for the good. And I think something that came out of it was especially in the business world, our shared, a reinvigorated recognition of our shared humanity, right? And the value of connection.
Yes.
And that people are the source of everything in every business, right?
Yeah.
And then what you described, we always say, is kind of a two-way street of trust and credibility really came through employers and employees, right? Employers learned, hey, wow, I can trust my employees to work remotely, right? And care for the business, right? Wow, employees are caring for the business. Employees establish more trust or trusted their employers more because employers cared for their employees, right?
Yes.
And so you see that, right? And now they want to help each other more and grow it. And I think employees also recognize their contributions to the business, and they really matter. Holy cow, their contributions matter, right? So all of these things, you saw employee engagement go up, like you said, that resulted in productivity between 43 and 53% increases, right? But to your point, we saw the great paradox, which is unprecedented. Typically, employee engagement and well-being go together and are additive and synonymous. This was the first time they diverged, and well-being went down. So, and well-being lack of well-being leads to burnout, which costs U.S. employees annually, U.S. employees, not employers, between 125 and 190 billion in healthcare costs, right? So that ain't small. And then to your point earlier in our discussion, you talked about turnover, right? Well, think about burnout, costs employers, right? And all their stakeholders. I mean, so why don't we just avoid it, right? So I think the new mantra is caring for people, and let's promote well-being. And I think more and more companies are doing that. We're certainly doing it with our clients around, technology. They don't realize, oh, wow, technology can actually do these little things that help, which is interesting because that's kind of the unknown. You wouldn't think about that, but little micro apps that we can build. So those things. I will say a couple other things that came out of that. By the way, hey, this isn't for any of the naysayer leaders out there that say, well-being, schmelbeing, whatever. Listen, Gen Zers and millennials make up right now between 46 and 50% of the workforce, right? Their number one care about for their employers is that their employer cares about their well-being. That's their number one care about. So, if an employer is not going to care about that, well, good luck hiring, all right, I guess, okay. I don't know how you're going to have a business, right? And by the way, Gen X and baby boomers, their number one care about is ethical organizational leadership. So we go back to conscious leadership. So, gosh, if you can have conscious leadership and then care about well-being, you might have a lot of great workforce. One last thing I'll tell you that came out that really, really got me jazzed. I don't know if you can tell because I'm subtle. Subtlety is my.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Very subtle, but is the Edelman Trust Barometer. Edelman's an independent research firm, and they evaluate society's trust in the different societal institutions, right? Government, media, business, NGOs, right?
Yes.
And in 2020, the 2021 barometer from 2020, business emerged as the number one trusted societal institution. That hasn't happened for I don't know if it's ever happened, but a very long time if it has. And I think that says a lot. The future of work is bright. I think if people actually hang on to this and use it as a springboard and momentum, I think the future of work is very, very bright.
Nancy Pautsch, wow, you are mesmerizing.
Oh.
Thank you so much for the insights, the strategies, the wisdom, the passion, and everything that you do. You are absolutely sending out ripples of goodness through the airwaves at this very moment. So thank you so much for being a blessing on this earth and for doing all the good work that you do.
Tim, back at you. Thank you. What an enriching conversation. Thank you so much.
Hey, it's Tim. You ever wonder why so many talented, hardworking entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with inconsistent self-belief or high stress or procrastination or self-sabotage? Well, the answer may surprise you, and the solution is already inside of you. I've been searching for the answers to this for decades, and I found them, and I put it into a new program called The Power of Your Unconscious Mind, Mental Secrets for Accelerating Success. And because you're a listener, I want to give you a free VIP copy. Head over to PowerMindsetProgram.com. That's PowerMindsetProgram.com and grab your copy today.